George Floyd protests in New York City have taken place at several sites in each of the 5 New York City boroughs since May 28, 2020. In reaction to the killing of George Floyd, most of the protests have been peaceful, while some sites experienced protester and/or police violence. Looting became a parallel issue. As a result, and amid the COVID-19 pandemic, the city was placed under curfew for June 1 through June 7. The protests catalyzed efforts at police reform, leading to the criminalization of chokeholds during arrests, and other legislation. On May 25, 2020, George Floyd, an African-American man, was killed by a white police officer in Minneapolis, Minnesota. A video of the incident depicting the officer kneeling on Floyd's neck for an extended period attracted widespread outrage, leading to local, national, and international protests and demonstrations. In New York City, reactions to the incident drew comparisons to Eric Garner, who died after being put in a chokehold by police in Staten Island in 2014. Likewise sparking a national outcry and becoming a major event in the Black Lives Matter movement. Garner's mother, Gwen Carr, participated in several of the demonstrations after the death of George Floyd. The New York Police Department has been the subject of frequent criticism for its treatment of black citizens, including use of racial profiling, its stop and frisk program, high-profile cases of police violence, and the use of mass arrests and other aggressive tactics against protesters. On May 28, nearly 100 protesters assembled in Union Square in march to City Hall, blocking traffic in Lower Manhattan. While mostly peaceful, there were conflicts between protesters and police, leading to dozens of arrests as protesters threw objects and an officer was punched in the face. Peaceful protests continued the next day, May 29, around Foley Square in Manhattan. Another group came together around the Adam Clayton Powell Jr. State Office building in Harlem. As the day went on, the protests became more violent. Groups moved to the Manhattan District Attorney's office and then over the Brooklyn Bridge. At Barclays Center, there were several clashes between protesters and law enforcement. In this and other protests, participants chanted or held signs bearing the names of other victims of police violence. In nearby Fort Greene Park, protesters were pepper-sprayed and tackled by police. More than 500 protesters demonstrated around the 88th precinct, and others were arrested attempting to break into the 79th precinct in Bedford-Stuyvesant. Some protesters threw bricks, bottles, and other objects at the police. In the early hours of May 30, a young woman from the Hudson Valley region and a young man were arrested for throwing a Molotov cocktail at an abandoned NYPD van. No police officers were hurt. However, both faced several charges including 4 counts of attempted murder. On July 1, both were charged with 7 federal charges and face long mandatory minimum sentences. Groups of police pushed and struck demonstrators with batons, and used pepper spray on others, including Assemblywoman Dinah Richardson and New York State Senator Zelnor Miri. Videos posted online appear to show demonstrators being beaten and punched by police officers. One video, depicting an officer in Brooklyn shoving a young woman who subsequently suffered a concussion. The incident led to an NYPD investigation and the officer was suspended without pay before being charged with misdemeanor assault, criminal mischief, harassment, and menacing. More than 200 people were arrested, mostly for minor charges. The New York Times described the day's events as largely peaceful demonstrations turned into jarring scenes of flaming debris, stampedes, and looted storefronts. There were also reports of protesters challenging people engaged in looting. Reverend Al Sharpton, Gwen Carr, and other activists held a vigil for George Floyd on Staten Island, near where Eric Garner had been killed in 2014. In Jackson Heights and Woodside in Queens, nearly 1,000 protesters marched from Diversity Plaza at Broadway and 37th Road to the New York City Police Department 115th Precinct Station on Northern Boulevard. Around 5,000 people were estimated to have attended various protests around the city. A video circulated depicting an incident in Brooklyn where a police officer pulled a protester's mask off to pepper spray him. The officer was eventually suspended. There were no arrests among the large crowd around Barclays Center, but a few people were arrested from breaking windows nearby. At the end of the third day of unrest, a total of 345 arrests had been made. 33 police officers were injured, and 47 police vehicles have thus far been damaged or destroyed, with several set on fire. Although several videos showed instances of police violence against protesters, no statistics were made available about the number of injured participants. Several gathered